Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of the iPullrank agency, and god damn, it's been a long time. I've missed you all. I am back, ready for my triumphant return to SEO and doing this show on a weekly basis. I am a father. I'm a dad. I had a baby girl about 2 months ago, which is why I've been out of commission. It's gonna be a little time before she crawls, but she's doing great. She's healthy. Her mom's doing great. And got to give thanks to the iPullrank agency for letting me have an awesome parental leave and spending that early time with my baby girl. But you're not here to hear about me. You want to know all about what's going on in the world of SEO. And I've missed a ton. I'm not going to recap all of it. I want to get right into what's been going on this past week. And it's been really cool stuff, whether it's SEO Pace Layers, Programmatic SEO, or even sitemaps. Okay, let's start with sitemaps. Sitemaps is where it's at because Google actually, minor little bit, but they are deprecating a couple of sitemap extension tags, specifically for images and videos. Why does this matter? Well, as mentioned in the Search Off the Record podcast with Gary Ilias, John Mueller, and Lizzie Sussman, they're talking all about sitemaps this week and how, adding all of these tags have made the code for sitemaps incredibly long, and it's not even useful anymore. In fact, specifically with video images, they recommend you just use data structured markup. With data structured markup, schema markup, you can indicate, all those specific information details that Google needs to know to crawl your videos and your images, and that does not need to be included in your sitemaps anymore. Minor thing, but it should clean things up there. Another big minor piece of news, the DMCA, so you can submit when someone does some sort of copyright infringement, you submit a DMCA, you get that content taken off the internet, removed from Google's index. Well, sometimes mistakes happen. Basically, a doctor driving app submitted a DMCA with over 180 different URLs included, and a casualty was Moz. Moz's homepage for a couple of days was taken off of search results, taken completely off the index. Cyrus Shepard was like, yo, Google, what's going on? Fortunately, it was restored relatively quickly, but Barry Schwartz of Search Engine Roundtable pointed out, that this is potentially an issue if you're a small business and you don't even realize that you've been de-indexed due to a DMCA complaint. That could really hurt your business. It's something that Google, they responded, they said, we try to be transparent, we try to move quickly, but also fix things quickly if errors happen. It's one of those kind of in-between issues that's tricky to make things right for everybody involved. Mistakes happen, but when a big, high-profile situation like Moz happens, the internet, specifically the SEO world, takes notice. So back in October 2021, the mobile search results went infinite forever and ever and ever. Basically, they rolled out that when you scroll on a mobile device, that the scroll, there's no page 2. It just goes on and on and on. Now, for the last 4 to 5 years, Google's been testing this out with desktops. Brody Clark noticed a uptick in these tests recently, indicating maybe we might see a infinite scroll rollout for desktop. So the reason that an infinite scroll on desktop might be important is it has to do with rank tracking, which isn't the biggest deal, but think about the way that we evaluate click-through rate depending on the query. If there are a bunch of ads or there are, feature snippet at the top, the amount of people who are actually going to click on the first organic listing or the 8th organic listing is going to change depending on what's on the SERP. It's not just 10 blue links. In fact, Jeff Coyle of Market Muse actually addressed this, in an article that he put out, basically saying that not all click-through rate SERPs are considered equal. Infinite scrolling could impact this significantly. Check out Jeff's article where he breaks down, the click-through rate and how we can't just use standardized organic listing number 1 is going to get 30% click-through rate. That's not always going to be the case depending on the SERP features, landscapes, depending on the query. Really interesting article, and pay attention to whether infinite scroll is rolled out. When it comes to Twitter threads, you gotta love sometimes the snark and engagement and collaboration of the SEO community. Search advocate John Mueller just threw it out there. He said, "What is your least favorite thing about SEO?" And this was one of those that really took off. There are a ton of answers across the industry. And so some of the themes that you saw is, one thing, people hate link building. People just generally hate link building. People have an issue with the transparency of Google and why you can't always, know the details of, whether it's not provided keywords or, Google Search Console lack of transparency, or hard to get all the data. It always feels like it's incomplete data. So check out that whole list. And there's a general distrust of Google where they say do one thing and then the actual results indicate that whatever they said you should or shouldn't do doesn't have the same impact that you would expect. And a lot of snark. It depends. Who gave people the right to make websites anyway? And so on and so forth. Great Twitter thread. So Folio Fed, I actually don't know his name. It's kind of one of those pseudonyms on Twitter. But Fed put together this really great programmatic SEO Twitter deep dive. He discussed how he got all this increase in traffic over the period of a few months, and he used programmatic SEO to do it. He people were really interested. They wanted to know more. So he explained about how programmatic SEO works, in which you use a data source. You then generate, thousands and thousands of variations of pages of that content using different types of pieces of that data. The example that he uses is, imagine a weather site. You can create a whole bunch of landing pages that are all tied together programmatically. So it's actually code that generates the pages. You then publish them, get them indexed, and then you would be able to get traffic from a significant amount of long tail keywords. It's a way to scale your content and deliver traffic, and it's becoming more and more interesting and popular in the SEO community, specifically with enterprises. There's some potential issues, especially with Google paying attention to AI generated content, but programmatic SEO has opportunities when done effectively. Check out the Twitter thread from Fed Bear, little Fed, big Fed. I don't know. I like Fed. Another great Twitter thread from our own Aaron Johnson on the iPullrank agency Twitter account, summarizing all about JavaScript SEO and best practices. He pulled some really interesting insights from a blog post on our site from Sergey Berzaborov of Jet Octopus. He actually was on a webinar of ours, but kind of diving in, redirecting for soft 404s, making sure the HTTP is all set, all about talking about rendering. A great Twitter thread there if you have curiosities when it comes to JavaScript SEO. Last week was the London SEO Meetup XL hosted by Blue Array. It was a great in-person conference. I wish I could have been there. I had FOMO, missing out, fear of missing out, FOMO. Don't worry, actually, Content King, the recently acquired by Conductor, provided a play-by-play of all the great, presentations and quotes and slides on their Twitter account, so check them out. But there were great presentations from Aleyda Solis talking all about workflows and how you can, answer the it depends question for really complicated situations. She provided a bunch of great resources and why it's important to create SEO flowcharts and workflows for working with clients or internally. You had Lily Ray, who did a great, presentation all about how Google is getting smarter, 5 ways. Specifically, she tapped into some EAT and seeing how authority has been built over time. Martin Split, it was on May 4th, so he was all decked out in his Stormtrooper gear, talking all about rendering, representing Star Wars, gave a great presentation. Crystal Carter talked about proactive indexing, how you can actively make sure that your content is being indexed on search engines. And then there were a variety of great panels, an all-women panel on JavaScript SEO with Natalie Ma and Aura or Mutznick. Fantastic event. There are all these pictures online of people being there and saying hi. I hope nobody got COVID, but it looked like it was a really fun event. Glad that that's happening. Great job by Blue Array. Seems like it was really well organized and put together. So back in March, there was like the third iteration of the product reviews update algorithm. Glenn Gabe, who's been following along very closely, gave his assessment of, with it being rolled out in March, now in May, we can start to see what of the best recommendations or iterations that Google put out there have actually been implemented in the rankings. And so he did a deep dive, whether it was, their suggestion about having, any sort of product review linked to multiple places that you could buy the product. And he said, that hasn't really been a big deal yet. Then, on the other hand, he said using video and images in your reviews has actually made an impact. The caveat there, though, is it doesn't necessarily have to be original videos yet. Like, you can embed anybody's video on your page and Google will give you credit for it. I don't think that's going to be like a long-term solution, because the goal with Google is not to just aggregate other people's content, but to produce your own and give some like firsthand insight. But right now, that's a loophole that isn't impacting. One of the best places Glenn recommends you watch on how to do it right is New York Times' Wirecutters. They're always testing out different ways to improve their rankings, and they're kind of a holy Bible guide of how to do product reviews. They invest obviously a ton into that. One other thing he said is you can't just take, while some thin content is still ranking highly for product reviews, you can't just take the manufacturer's description and then put your own spin on it by saying and I really tried this out. That doesn't work. And if it is working now, it won't work long term. So actually invest in a unique perspective. Yes, you can't try every product, but try to actually put together some unique concepts or perspectives or ideas than just regurgitating what the manufacturer has on their own actual product page. Shelley Walsh is starting a new podcast vlog interview series where she's interviewing old school SEOs. She calls it the pioneers. It looks really cool. Her first guest was Anna Johns, who's been in the industry for 20 plus years, talking all about what SEO was like back in the day, like why PubCon, how it got its origin, what were some spam techniques that used to work. Really cool series, for those of us who, the Wayback Machine doesn't work on actual videos, and some videos disappear, and I think it's cool to anecdotally have these stories and have these conversations and surface what SEO was like, because it has, despite all the fundamentals being the same, SEO has changed significantly. So I'm looking forward to future interviews that Shelley is going to be having and publishing on her site. Oh man, Tom Critchlow, SEO MBA, that he's been putting together his whole cohort course about learning how to put SEO in the C-suite and pitch it and get it adopted by organizations. He had a doozy of a email/article that he put out last week all about SEO Pace Layers. He explains Pace Layers in the sense of civilization and organizations where you have these layers of a company where it's testing and results versus workflows and governments and hiring people, all the way to the slowest layers, which are about the culture and the actual industry that an organization is part of. And he translates these pace layers to SEO and how it can be really challenging to make a difference, especially if you are an agency working with a client, to basically get changes. The slowest layers are the most effective, but the hardest to make fundamental change. I mean, those are the elements that really rock an organization, changing the culture, trying to get them to adopt SEO. But it's important that you fight and you try to implement that through those conversations over the course of time, because just getting quick wins is not always going to get an SEO project approved. That's a starting point, but it's not the end point. The other thing that makes it really tricky specifically with SEO is that a lot of the marketing executives at bigger organizations don't tend to have an SEO background. a lot of times they have an advertising background, and the average lifespan of a CMO, like at a major enterprise, is only like 2 years. So you need quick wins for their performance. That's their prerogative. And with SEO, being a compounding type of strategy that works over time, what you invest now will help you 2 years, and even more 5 years, and even more 10 years. It's hard to get that sort of digital transformation. And then when you take into consideration that some industries are just so slow to evolve, like tech industries are way ahead of the game. They're starting, and not even they all have their fundamentals right. But when you go to older institutions like legal or financial institutions, it is a slow process. While we've seen a lot of digital change, a lot of them are not there yet. And so thinking about making a change using these SEO pace layers, the way that Tom kind of lays out, is a good sort of strategy and a good mental framework on how you need to approach getting SEO projects and getting SEO programs installed at your business. Great read. So this wasn't last week, but a couple weeks ago, wanted to highlight Lydia Infante did some research herself, some great journalism, where she looked at 7 top SEO publishers to see the disparity of articles written by gender. And she found that 61% of articles over the last 12 months were written by men, whereas only 39% were written by women. Honestly, it's not good enough, and her shining a light on that just shows you the opportunity that it's important to surface all these great women writers in our industry and have more articles go to them and not just have this male perspective. It was between both editorial publishers like Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Land, and then actual SaaS blogs like Moz, SEMrush, Ahrefs. She found that SEMrush and Moz actually did the best job when it came to including and showcasing women in their writing, but ultimately, we all need to do better. Great article. Take a look at her research, worth checking out. In the world of technical SEO, Adam Gent did a little bit of an interesting deep dive about robot.txt. A lot of people get confused about that. What he found is, what are those situations where, articles are actually being blocked by the robot.txt, but they're actually still showing up in the index? And he found specifically in this case study that it was tied a lot to links, internal links throughout the website that were still referencing the article that got surfaced. Basically, Google has a policy from 13 years ago, the Matt Cutts days, where, if they determine from anchor text that a article is, or a website page is actually worth surfacing and actually worth indexing, they're going to index it. So, Adam laid out a few different potential solutions, including like putting a no follow tag on those internal links and making sure that it's not actually sending that link juice, that link equity to those pages, so it actually respects the robot.txt file, robot text file, and doesn't index them. He found that it still took months and months and months for that to work, but interesting other techniques that he provided, in terms of putting the canonical, or even making the follow link broken, doing a worse practices for that link so Google doesn't want to follow it. Check out that article. It was a nice kind of dive into robot text files and how they work and don't work. There was also an awesome interview on the SEO Rant by Morty Oberstein of Greg Bernhardt. Greg does SEO for Spotify. Greg does SEO for Shopify. I always get those messed up, don't you? Anyway, talking all about Python and SEO. Greg is a great advocate in the community. He was, kind of building up some of the other folks who are doing great work with Python and kind of advocating on how, you can do a lot of great automated tasks using Python for SEO. And, they had a fun discussion about old school 90s bands or boy bands, which I enjoyed. Great podcast. Check out Morty's SEO Rant. And then Scott Brinker, every year he does for MarTech, the state of the MarTech industry of 2022. So he updated this now. 12 years ago, there was like 1,000 SaaS tools that, marketing SaaS tools out there. And every year he updates this with this really cool visualization of all the logos that are, categorized by category. In 2022, there were over 9,932 SaaS marketing tools. And that's up from approximately 8,000 done last time in 2020. What I found interesting specifically for SEO is there's 181 SEO tools out there. Now, this could be everything from image compression plugins to full SEO suites like SEMrush or Ahrefs or Moz. 181. I feel like maybe I've used 30 or 40 of these. I'd be curious to know how many of these tools that you've tried out over your time. One great speaking of like product reviews, one great website to look at a lot of these tools is Sam Underwood's SEO Tool Belt. Basically, check out the link in the description, but he breaks down all the different types of SEO tools with a little review from his perspective. It's a great site to kind of discover SEO tools that you never knew existed. And finally, in kind of still SEO related, but Nick Leroy, who has his SEO for Lunch newsletter and has been working on freelancer content, has teamed up to co-found the Seojobs.com. It's an SEO job board, which is great for our industry. One thing that I love about the job board, it already has like a ton of listings up there. In fact, iPullrank is still looking for an SEO director to join us. So if you're interested, come on, throw your hat in the proverbial ring. But one thing I love about the job board is it has a section specifically for jobs with salaries, which we need to do more of. In the US, Colorado requires you to put the salary on the actual job listing. I think everyone in the US and in the world should do that. But check out the SEO job board. It's Seojobs.com, and we have our salary up there for the SEO director position. Come apply. That's it. It's so good to be back. I think my baby girl is sleeping in her crib in the next room, but I have missed the SEO world. Y'all are doing great. If you have any ideas on things that you want to see covered in the SEO Weekly, I'm back. Let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at Garrett Sussman. My name is Garrett Sussman of iPullrank Agency. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube and share on Twitter and LinkedIn and TikTok. Did you know we have a TikTok? Aaron Johnson's been cranking out TikToks. Check out our TikTok channel. That's completely, neither here nor there, but going to be producing more YouTube shorts and all that jazz. So subscribe. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great week. As you know, we are now publishing these every Monday. So, I hope your weekend was awesome. And I will catch you next Monday. Peace.